those who can actually fight them. It's like it's literally basically stereotyping.
How y'all feeling about the exam? Good.
Just one up.
How are you? Well, we're just gonna open the floor to y'all. If you have any specific questions or specific concepts y'all want us to review that, or specific examples.
Explain this one. It's about the trunk.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
someone actually showed that to me, and I think we missed it. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Sorry. No, I was thinking. Okay.
It's lower. Page 4.
We're trying to, the side of the screen probably doesn't look all that great. But okay, so yeah, let's just walk through the question. So the external force, we can't really see anything from the top photo, so we have to look at the bottom picture. And so I like to use landmarks for hip things. So I can see in the bottom picture that her sternum is looking at her right hip. And if she were to let all of her muscles go, her trunk would twist to the right. So that's what the external force is trying to do. So we need muscles that pull the opposite way. We need left transverse rotators. And then from start to finish, we're observing left transverse rotation. So we would be doing left transverse through concentric contraction. Please.
How are y'all feeling with like finding the force when observing the picture? Because I feel like if you get the force wrong, everything else kind of falls apart.
It's hard to see when it's like stationary, like when you can't see it.
Yeah,
Like
the first, like this first one, that's definitely a difficult one. Yeah. For stuff like that, if you can find the force in either picture, you're most likely gonna get it correct. So like you don't have to start with the top one. In fact, it might be easier for most things to look at both pictures, especially if one is like neutral. So like for the first one, we can say her trunk is anatomical. There's no force acting on her. So we have to go to the second one.
And even if it looks like, yeah, definitely there could be more forces acting on her than just her transverse plane of her trunk. But on the test, Dr. Campbell will clarify, like, I want you to observe what's happening in the transverse plane or the sagittal plane. So that could also give you some context about how you need to find force. That's all.
Alright. So you get a picture and like mark all the answers, and I got the bottom 2 wrong. I wanted to ask them.
Ever y'all see that, y'all can bring it up. We can, I mean, we just took this class last year. Neither of us are like experts at this like Dr. Campbell is, so we get things wrong often, as y'all have seen this semester. So come to us and we can work through it together.
It's good if you can notice those mistakes though, because that means like, oh, like I'm not 100%, trusting this. I'm using my own knowledge to, check it out. So that's good. It's your team.
Any other specific questions?
Man bun is like this, and like the one number goes up there, so use it. That's the picture of my phone.
So what's the exercise doing?
It's like I'm doing the his legs are on the ground. He's doing the
Yeah.
yeah, it's on page 9.
Okay.
Oh, lower extreme.
Oh, is this the issue? Oh, sorry. So what was your question? Just going over.
I think I'm just confused, 'cause, like, it shows like the force is trying to flex it, but wouldn't we like go forward, wouldn't be like extension, or like, what that?
Yeah, so I think, so for this section, we're looking at just the knees, what's happening in the knee.
Yeah.
So I think whenever I first saw this one, I was like, wait, I don't know which one.
Yeah,
So we're
she-
looking at the knees.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if like you were to let gravity do its thing, his knees would go, his bottom would touch his toes, his feet. So his knees would become more, even though they're in a flexed position, they're becoming more flexed. So that's what the force is trying to do.
Yeah, that can be confusing because you're already in a flex position. So I definitely understand that. If any of you work in a PT clinic, these are called Nordics. So you have Nordic hamstring and Nordic quad. These are the Nordic quad. So if you're on your knees and you're going back into a more flexed position, you're working those extensors, right? So if y'all have any background knowledge, y'all can use that to answer these questions as well. I don't know if any of y'all have kind of started to figure that out, but like any resistance training background or PT clinic background, knowing that can kind of help as well, because like you can look at this and like if you've seen it before, it's supposed to be working quads, right? So you can use that to kind of like figure out your answer, and then you just have to find your concentric or eccentric. But yeah, this is another one that Ekene was talking about, where like you might need to go to the second picture to figure out what the force is trying to do. Because from the first picture, you can either go forward
That's
or
what
back.
I was looking for at first, so I was confused.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is one of those where you have to kind of look at both pictures and see like, okay, what is the motion that's happening? Okay, what's my force trying to do?
Yeah, and then like, this could also be used as like a trick question if you was to, like, observe the motion of the trunk. And like, you may think at first glance like, oh yeah, he's going farther back, he must be extending. But his position really isn't changing from 1 to 2.
For the hip too. And if he asks about the hip or the trunk, you have to be able to identify, okay, they're working isometrically to keep the midsection in line as the knees do all of the work. So I feel like both of those other options are up in the air. Fair game. Any other questions about this one?
So like that, like the trunk or hips, the isometric, the first two would be the same thing, and then it'd just be isometric, and like how would that?
So if we're looking at the trunk, like in the first position, we see it's anatomical, and then the second picture is also anatomical. So if you're doing FABC, you have your force, you have your A, and then B is, you're not seeing any motion, there's no change from 1 to 2. So B is no motion, C has GIs.
If you wanted to fill out your FABC, you could just, for this one specifically, you could observe that there is no motion happening. If you wanted to do your FABC though, you could do, the force in this one is trying to extend your trunk. If you don't really like hold it still, you wanna like bend it back, right? So you could do it that way and just know that you're working your flexors isometrically to keep you from extending back. But yeah, you could do that for the hips as well. It's just whatever is gonna help you see that there's no. Any other questions?
I know over the 100 there.
Sure. Any specific question for this one, or we just wanna run through it? Sure. Okay, so I think we're also looking at the knees here, too, right? Yes, we're looking at the knees. So in the first picture, if she were to turn off all of her muscles, her bottom would go down and then her knees would stay extended. And then same in the first picture, if it's not obvious in that top picture, you can look at the bottom picture and be like, okay, if gravity, she turns off all her muscles, her knees are gonna extend. So you know that's your external force, so you're gonna have to have flexors, that's your muscle group. And so from bottom to top, you're observing knee extension. So you have flexors doing extension through the centers.
And this is another one that he could possibly talk about the hips.
Yeah, for sure.
Cause you might want to say, oh, there is motion in the hips, cause the hips are going up as she's pulling the ball towards her, but there is not any motion happening at the hips, but they do have to be working isometrically to, like the muscles in the hips have to be working isometrically to hold her up off the floor. Yeah, this one's a tricky one. I think working through it the best you can. And then also like we've said, and y'all have seen, the answer choices are gonna make it obvious what he's asking. Or you can ask if you're confused about what you're supposed to be looking.
I use a design that's when you're trying to go faster than gravity. You're trying
Yeah, so if you're trying to go faster than gravity, then you're not looking at the external force. You're just looking at, okay, I'm going faster than gravity, so I have to have a concentric contraction. Therefore, my A and B have to be the same. But yeah, so for any slow and controlled exercises, that's when FABC really comes into play. And that's when you're not going to want to have muscles going in the same direction or working in the same direction.
So would it be you do that on this or?
So he's not gonna like give you FABC and you have to fill it out. It's just a learning tool. But he could definitely ask you a question about, you know, like slamming a hammer or something like that versus doing like a tricep extension or a bicep curl. That kind of thing.
For the most part though, I'm gonna use the word almost always going to be the opposite of your force. Your agonist is gonna be the opposite of force. Which is why this works so well, because it makes finding the agonist super obvious. If you're sitting there and you're confused and you're like, I'm seeing the forces the same, get up and do the motion. Probably it's gonna be your best bet to figure out like what's actually happening. And also, like Grace was saying, if it's a question where you're like, you know, doing a fly swatter or a hammer or whatever, you're not going to be looking at the force. You're going to just be, okay, what's the direction of the force of my muscles and who's working concentrically to make that happen?
Try watching, I mean, those kind of people in.
Yeah. See if I can. Live.
Really good. That was diabolical.
Strange picture. Yeah, for this one, the question could be like, what agonist or what muscle group and what contraction is she using whenever she brings her hand down? So we know here that she's trying to fall to squat, so you don't want gravity, you don't want eccentric contraction because that's going to be slow and controlled. And you don't want gravity because that's just not fast enough. You want to use your muscles concentrically. So yeah, so the motion you would observe is extension. So the only way to do extension concentrically is through using your extensors.
Okay, that makes sense. And it possibly could be like figured as like a radial or ulnar one, it'd be almost like the same thing, pretty much.
Yes. Yeah, you could look at like, okay, if she's like slamming her hand at the last second like this, like I see my pinky is closer to my wrist over here, so it has to be patient. And again, it's still concentric because you're trying to do it faster.
Like volumetric sequence, like examples.
Sure. Yeah, we can go over some.
We can do that picture's all, I just thought it was funny. But if you think about, like, if you are gonna get the fly and you measured it, or in the case of like a hammer, like, you gotta speed up the flexion. Then you have to slow down the flexion, turn right around and speed up the extension. So those extensors, that's where their plyometric sequences can be centric braking, followed by concentric speeding up, and it's specifically that window. So slowing you down because you're being pulled apart, changing your direction. That's where the force is going to be highest at your change of direction. So for us, we need to know that. So that's where the risk of injury is going to be the greatest. Damage is going to be the greatest. So it's not, I think in class we emphasize, it's not all the eccentric followed by all the concentric, and that's a repetition. Right? Specifically that part where you're putting on the brake because of eccentric, and then you're continuing the push. Yes.
Yeah, so for plyometrics, I like to split it up into like 3 or 4 parts depending on it. So for this example specifically, it's going to be always 3 parts because you have the speeding up, and then this slowing down, and then speeding up again, and then once she smacks it, that's the force that's stopping her. So you're not having an eccentric contraction. So I like if we were doing like the jumping jack one, and he didn't want you to clap your hands at the top or the bottom, that's when you could add a 4th slowing down. And so with this, I know that to speed up a motion, I have to have concentric contraction, and then to slow down a motion, I'm going to have eccentrics here. So that's how I like to break it down. Yeah, so if I'm speeding up here, what's happening at the shoulder? What motion is observed? Flexion, exactly. So I'd be speeding up flexion, your concentrics. And I would have to use what muscle group to do that? Yes, flexors. Okay, and then when I get to the top, I have to slow down because if I don't, I'm just going to fling my arm back. So what muscle group has to be slowing me down? Extensors. Yeah, so we're slowing down flexion eccentrically with our extensors. And then lastly, once we're here, we're going to speed up what motion? So shoulder extension. And then again, that has to be concentric because we're speeding it up. So what muscle group are we using? So that's kind of the method I like to use. And then, okay, so now we have all these phases. So where would our plyometric phase be happening? One to two. So it's actually going to be 2 to 3 because for plyometrics, that's the moment when you're going from eccentric to concentric. But yeah, does that make sense?
So how he has to play, that's a good word, that's a word. Possibly, like,
He could show you like that picture, I guess, and ask where the plyometric phase is happening, I guess, and I'm trying to think what his options would be.
I feel like I kind of remember it being speeding up flexion through concentric to slowing down
Oh, yeah.
flexion through eccentric. Or the next one will be speeding up through extension through concentric, speeding up.
Yeah, there
It'll
would be like
be-
two of these next to each other,
Yeah.
and then you would pick. Like, okay, is it between slowing down flexion and speeding up extension, or?
And then obviously the big part will be the eccentric and concentric or concentric and eccentric portion of it being like. Okay, because there's two speeding up. The speeding up has to come second to your eccentric contraction. Right? So just making sure that you're paying attention to the order of things and making sure that it all says the same thing that makes sense.
And then he could also ask you plyometric phases for like an exercise that isn't like trying to go faster than gravity. Like I still remember this question from my test, and I was just like, I don't even know what plyometric means. Like in a leg extension machine, he could ask between like which two pictures is the plyometric sequence happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what should I cut? I might need to separate. Yeah. So he could ask you between which two pictures is there plyometrics happening. So again, I would kind of use the same method here of where am I speeding? How did I do this? I would look at where my eccentric phases are and where my concentric phases are.
For this one specifically, using the words like speeding up and slowing down might not be
Yeah, that's not gonna.
the best use of words, just because it might get confusing because you're not necessarily speeding it up and then slowing it down, but there is a point where it stops and then you slowly let it back down. And so where you're at the bottom, so right here, your extensors are working eccentrically to slow down that movement, and then they have to kick back on concentrically to extend. So that would be that plyometric sequence or plyometric part that he might ask for. And the sequence would be we're extending through concentrics, flexing through eccentric, and stop it. Like the slowing down would be through eccentric. So there's not necessarily like slowing down, speeding up.
Yeah, so for this one, because we're having eccentric and concentric, that means that we can have two FABCs. For these ones, where it's a slow and controlled exercise, asking for plyometrics, I like to use FABC. So I know what my external force is. I know what kind of contractions I need to figure out. So say we want to do concentric for the first one. I know that my A and my B have to be the same, but let's figure out external force. So it's trying to cause flexion. So I need my extensors. And they have to do extension to work concentrically. And then I'll make another one for eccentric, which the only thing changing here is B and C. So this is going to be the same. my motion is gonna be collection, so I'm having extensors do collection through eccentric. So I know that whenever I'm gonna get confused. So I know that the eccentric to concentric phase is when I go from flexion to extension. Yeah, so the plyometrics would be having me. I'm doing flexion and then extension.
Yeah, so at the bottom.
At the bottom. Where,
So you know how, I'm sure most of y'all work out, you know how whenever people are on weights, they don't slow it down, it smacks it and you hear it throughout the entire room. That's because they're not doing plyometric sequences at all. They are not slowing it down, they're not controlling it. So you have to work eccentrically at the bottom to make sure that you don't let those weights pull you forward or shove your legs back. You have to be slow and controlled, and to do that, you have to work eccentrically. So that's that bottom part where you're slowing down your flexion and then speeding back there, you're gonna controllingly stop the flexion and then you're gonna start doing your extension again. That's gonna be that plyometric part where we said not to use the slowing down and speeding up, but you're keeping it from banging those weights, and then you're gonna continue into your next rep.
yeah, another way to think of it is like, where am I experiencing like the most wear and tear on my muscles? And so, yeah, the plyometrics isn't like doing a full phase of eccentric and then a full phase of concentric. It's the moment when eccentric turns to concentric. So yeah, that's when you're slowly letting things down, and then at the bottom you bring things back up. So that's why it would have to be that picture on the left. But yeah, these ones can be kind of confusing. But yeah, I think finding out which parts are the eccentric, which parts are the concentric will determine the plyometric.
So plyometric is gonna be eccentric to concentric, it's not gonna be concentric to eccentric.
So he would ask on the test, like, which of these two pictures is the plyometric phase happening. So yeah, it would be in that left picture.
Where the knees are flexed.
Yeah,
Or he could even ask give you the answer options of extensors doing extension through concentric to the extensors doing flexion through eccentric. And so you have to remember that the eccentric has to go. That makes sense. So just remembering that part, and then you'll be fine. Y'all know everything else to be able to get to that point. Just remember that it's the eccentric before eccentric.
Can we do roll this like that?
do you want like a controlled exercise or?
Facts.
Rather see like jumping jack or sprinting?
Sprint.
I think we observed what happens at the elbow, but we can also observe what happens. I'm thinking. Yeah. So let's. Sprinting, we know that has to be faster than gravity. Obviously you're trying to go as fast as you can. So for this one, we're not doing slow and controlled. So this is where I would break it down into the 4 parts of I'm speeding up, then I'm slowing down, then I'm speeding up, then I'm slowing down. So let's take a look at his shoulders first. Maybe we'll observe his right shoulder. So, in order to get to his first position, what motion was he speaking of? Of his right shoulder. Yeah, he had to be speeding up shoulder extension. And so we know that speeding up is concentric, so we have extensors working. So then once he gets to the top of that though, right where it's paused in the picture, he has to slow down. He has to put on the brakes. So he's slowing down. That has to be eccentric contraction. So what motion are we slowing down? We're slowing down the extension. Eccentric. That has to be with the flexors. Okay, so now once we're at the top, we're changing the direction and speeding up again. So now we're speeding up shoulder flexion. That has to be concentric. Flexors do concentric or do flexion through concentric. And then lastly, we have another slowing down motion. Once he gets here, he has to slow down. So yeah, we would be slowing down flexion through eccentrics. And we would have to use the extensors. So remember, slowing down implies eccentric. We're observing flexion still though. Let's be eccentric. We're slowing down. And those have to be opposite. So yeah. Okay, so now we have all of our different contractions used for the sprinting. So now we can determine where our plyometrics are. So from which numbers, as there's going to be two sequences, two phases of plyometrics. Yeah, so we would have 2 to 3, 4, and then 4 to 1 to 1 and 2. Because eccentric comes before concentric. Yes, eccentric, concentric, eccentric, concentric.
So we could even do it for the left arm, the left shoulder, and it would be starting at 4. 4 would be 1, and then we would go up. And so just showing that like it doesn't matter which arm you're looking at or where your starting position is, it's always going to be the same breakdown.
Yeah, even if you get confused during this, it's important to remember that eccentric to concentric, the same muscle group has to be working. So that's why it has to be 2 to 3 and not 2 to 1, for example, because you have flexors and extensors, it just doesn't work like that.
So that could be another way that you use, if you're able to do this, but you get confused where your plyometric sequence is gonna be, look at where your your group is the same. So like the 2 steps where the muscle group is gonna be the same. And then just remembering that you're eccentric. That makes sense.
And then we can look at the hips as well. I love it. See if it'll shoot. So yeah, we'll look at his right foot. So how did he have to move to get to this position? His hips had to flex. So yeah, we'd have speeding up, hip flexion. which has to work how concentrically. And so the muscle group and the motion have to match up, that's why it's flexors. And then once he gets to that top of the photo, he has to slow down. So he's slowing down flexion or eccentrics. And that can only happen when the extensors are turning. And then once he gets to that final top part, he has to speed up his direction the other way. So he's speeding up hip extension. And speeding up means we have to have concentric. So that's what the extension is. And then lastly, once he gets to this position, he has to slow down. So he's slowing down the extension with eccentrics using the flexors. So where would the plyometric sequence be happening? Exactly. We have 2 to 3 and then 4 to 1 again.
And we use this one for the fast. So
Yeah, so for slow and controlled exercises, I would utilize FABC to find your contractions for eccentric. I mean, your agonist motion for eccentric, and then for concentric. And then for things that you're wanting to move faster than gravity, having kind of this 4-step plan can help you out.
like you said before, it'd be like the 3 steps if it wasn't like an open chain. Or
Exactly.
it was a closed chain exercise.
Yeah, so if you had like you're hitting a nail with a hammer, that's the thing that's slowing you down. It's not your turning, you're not stopping at the last second before you hit the hammer. Hit the nail with the hammer. That would be the force that stops you. But here we don't have any forces trying to stop.
Another way you could look at it is if it's continuous, the continuous movements, it's gonna be 4 steps. If there's an end to the sequence of events, then it's gonna be 3.
I think another example he showed in a lecture was like a lumberjack like chopping wood. Like chopping wood at the bottom, that's stopping his motion. So there's no eccentric phase at the bottom, slowing it down. But that's a good lecture to kind of review if you're still wanting plyometric stuff. If you want to like practice using the formula or something. Because those ones have videos, so it's kind of easier to see kind of what's going on. Are y'all, oh, sorry.
Y'all have questions about this, or y'all wanna move on to something else?
So it's just identifying where plyometric is occurring, like that's.
Yeah. And so your answer options will be either flexion through flexors doing flexion through eccentric to your flexors doing extension through concentric, or, and it'll go through all of these.
Yeah, so you could have an answer choice that's like all of this next to all of this.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And so if you do it this way, you'll just be able to be like, okay, I know it's going 2 to 3, not 3 to 2 or 3 to 1. So you'll be able to use your words on your paper to kind of compare to the answer choices you have. I think this is gonna be y'all's first experience with using y'all's like sheet of paper a lot. I think I used 2 full sheets of paper in this for my 310 final or 3rd exam.
How are y'all with like stretching? Sure. So for stretching, I would just say the general rule is in order to stretch a muscle group, you want to position the muscle group in the opposite way of how it is. So if you're trying to stretch the bicep, you know that the bicep pulls in a direction of flexion. Sorry, scratch that terminology. So say you want to stretch elbow flexors. Elbow flexors pull in a direction of flexion. So you would want to position the elbow in an extended position in order to stretch that muscle group. If you were trying to stretch hip internal rotators, you would want to position the hip externally. If you wanted to stretch right transverse trunk rotators, you would want to position the trunk left transverse. So as long as you kind of got that down of like it goes the opposite way, that's how you have to position it, then I think it'll make sense.
Yeah, so like. This is probably a super basic example, but you do I think the trunk is probably gonna be the most to see, but just to get down the concept of like. It's gonna be the opposite of the motion. So here her knee is flexed. And so she has to be stretching the extensors because her knee is flexed. So if you're observing flexion. If it's a flexed position, then it's gonna be extensors that are being stretched.
That's not what it was.
So yeah, he could ask the question a couple different ways. He could give you a picture like that and be like, what muscle group is being stretched? Or he could give you a muscle group and you'd have to say what position you need to put it in to stretch it.
Yeah, so the question could be worded, what position of the knee allows stretching of the extensors? And so
The answer would be flexed.
the answer would be flexed. And he could trip you up and put flexion. So remember the terminology of position versus motion. The position's gonna have the EP at the end.
Could you give us a trunk example?
That's Joe Viper. It's his favorite one. So we'll identify the position first. So let's see. We'll identify the position of his trunk.
Right.
Yeah. So he's looking at his sternum is looking at his right hip. And so what's being stretched if he's right transversely rotated?
So transverse.
Yeah. And so this one's kind of obviously he's isometrically using his muscles, but if he were to let his legs fall all the way to the side, it would be a stretch. That's why I pulled this one up because you probably won't find
I
many.
feel like a lumbar rotation might be more of like stretch. Like this,
Yeah.
where they're fixed on the ground. Because I feel like that specific picture, yeah, could be confused with contractions. But similar concept.
So that one's like if force gravity was, let's say, one way it'd be left, like the forward bump to FABC, and it'd be left transversely rotated.
So, are you asking about if it's a isometric contraction kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so gravity's trying to make him look at his right hip more. So in order to hold that position, he needs left transverse rotators to do that.
And there's no motion in this picture, so it'd be working isometrically.
Because you want to have muscles working against gravity. If you use the same right transverse rotators to and it's trying to right transverse, he would slam his legs into the ground.
Mm-hmm. stretching of her trunk. Those abdominal muscles.
Yeah, so again,
So-
you could identify what position she's in. For me, I like to use landmarks, so like Emma was saying, what hip is the sternum looking at? It's looking at the left hip. So if she's positioned that way, what muscles has is she stretching? The right.
I feel like the rotators are probably gonna be the most difficult. It's like she's extended, she's stretching the front, and you're flexed and you're stretching those sensors in the back.
This is where the swivel chairs come in handy.
This
You
is
can
exactly where
just,
the
you
silver
can
is.
do the motion, you can feel the stretch.
Yeah. But stretching is also super helpful because it's just the opposite of the motion. So whatever the position is, you're stretching the opposite. That would be doing what? The opposite motion.
They was like, it's right knee open, stuff on the ground, and then you left your first, you rotated, you go behind them.
Sure. I think you just look up like kneeling down, kneeling on one of yours. I'm looking at you like a board. It's like a, yeah, let's see that picture. Yeah, so the question he asked in class today was, this is your starting position, and then your ending position is whenever she does left transverse pelvic girdle rotation. Yeah, so he asks, do you want to do contractions or stretching? Sure. Let's do contractions first. Yeah, so here we're observing left transverse pelvic girdle rotation. So if we look at the right knee first, we can see that. Yeah, different things. This one I feel like it's good to look at maybe what the motion is first. Because, yeah, the motion at the right hip, like, yeah, gravity's trying to flex her knee, but you can't really see what gravity's trying to do whenever she left transversely rotates. So you don't have an external force, therefore you know your contraction has to be concentric. And then yeah, if you're observing left pelvic girdle and your hip is flexed, then you must have horizontal abduction happening. That's the motion observed. And then the only way to do that concentrically is having horizontal abductors. And here, that doesn't. So that's what's going on at the right hip. And if we look at the left hip, we also figured out that, yeah, there's no external force trying to do something, so it's going to be concentric. And then our motion, our hip is not flexed at the left hip, and we're doing this. So if you plant your flag here and you do like this, if you go here, now your thumb is like on the inside of your knee. If you look, you can see it. So you had to have internal rotation happening. So that's internal rotation, concentric, the agonist has to be internal rotators. So now we can do the stretching. So we know, basically, you're gonna look at, so you're not looking at a motion that's happening from that position to the left transverse position. You're looking at what muscles are being stretched when the hip is, the pelvic girdle is left transversely rotated. Without, trying to think how to do this by connecting it, but I think that's. I think if you were to connect, so I just be the agonist. I would just look at the position when you're strictly look at positioning whenever you're doing stretching. Because I think looking at that and then trying to figure it out from there can be too confusing. So, okay, I know that here I'm horizontally abducted at my right hip. So because that's my position, my muscle group being stretched has to be the opposite. It has to be the horizontal abductors. And then because my position for the left hip is internally rotated, that means I have to be stretching external rotators of the hip. I'm sorry that was super roundabout. But yeah, does that kind of make sense? Yeah, so
No, I understand, I'm just kind of like trying to piece together why the right hip we use the abductors and the left hip we use like the internal rotators. Like, why is it not like, cause it's from,
Yeah, so the flexion at the right hip is gonna cause horizontal abduction. So we know this is horizontal and abduction, right? Well, this is regular abduction. Then we have our internal and external rotation, which is when the hip is extended. So when you're here and you have this motion, you're here, you have this motion, you have to have that horizontal abduction here. And then this one is internal and external.
yeah, I feel like what Emma's doing, like breaking it down and
Yeah, doing it one leg at a time.
one leg at a time is helpful.
And do the motion, because you can feel it, because if this feels the exact same. So doing it helps a lot, even if it's like that's where you start. You're not trying to feel anything. If that's where you start, I think that helps a lot. If you're just looking at it, you're like, I'm lost. So, and for a question like this, he will give you internal and external, horizontal and abduction as options. So you need to be aware that there's two things happening at both hips, like two different things happening.
Yeah, and the reason I said like the right hip is flexed is to help you identify that it's not just ab and abduction, but it's horizontal because the hip is flexed. The same thing goes like if your shoulders are flexed and you observe ab and abduction, it has to be horizontal. So that's just a trick type of. Yeah, like he told you in class, like this is going to be probably the hardest example that he gives you. Like he's gone over the hard. But yeah, if you can identify these when it's hard to see, like you're good. Questions? Yeah, I feel like if you still need like some starting points for studying, maybe go through like the joints, look at what planes and axes they move in, and then you can identify the different agonists groups that you're responsible for. So every motion has a muscle group. So just familiarizing with that yourself with those things are helpful. Yeah, you can go through your reviews, do the FABCs. You can test yourself with plyometric questions and rephrase stuff to do stretching questions. Like you could easily turn this into a left hip, what is being stretched question.
There's a lot of those on the review as well. If you're struggling with plyometrics specifically, find a question that has two motions, so you can even do it for like the shoulders here. You don't want to slam the weights into your leg, so what's happening to keep that to keep your motion controlled? So that would be a plyometric application to a question that's on the review. It's not what I'm asking or what we're asking on the review, but you can apply many different questions to the pictures that we gave you.
Yeah, and if you want more like FAQC stuff, all of that is like same kind of pictures that are in previous reviews. So you can go through exam 2 review and turn those all into what happens from right to left or left to right. And then, yeah. Says
Will be available as well if you'll have any questions about tonight or tomorrow. Steve made it. Thank you all. Thank you.